Alright, for this week we're going to talk about flexbox. For this demonstration I'm going to start out with 5 boxes and I'll go down the list of commands. The first one I'm going to cover is flex direction. The default flex direction is row, which it would automatically see. So we can change it up a little to give you a different view. Flex direction acts like a mirror when in reverse. Everything is reversed. The number of the boxes is backwards as well as placement. In a flex box, they all still flex. If you want to do other commands on the list, such as the column command, they will do exactly that, be in a column. Keep a note that even though they flex left to right, they do not flex up down. You still have to scroll. That doesn't work that way. Next command we'll talk about is flex wrap. The basic default for flex wrap is no wrap. It's what you expect to see. It's what happens when you compress them. However, if you put wrap on, you now have a different aspect of the operation. Looks like a row. When you try to compress it, everything wraps around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other alternative is to wrap reverse, which is not always as you want it to be. If you wrap it, notice here that it actually does reverse everything when it wraps, but how 3 and 4 are not changed doesn't really add up sometimes. Next we'll go to the combination command, flex flow. Flex flow is a combination of flex direction and flex wrap. And these are, of course, the standards if you were to use flex direction or flex wraps by themselves. So if we just change this to column with no wrap, this is what you would get. More fun commands are like justify content. Justify content works on the main axis, or up the left and right. Commands include flex end, center, space around, space between, and stretch. The default setting looks no different than if you were just to use basic flex command. Change things around, say we want to start from the other end. We now start the other end. Kind of like reverse, only it doesn't actually reverse the numbers. It just puts everything on the other side. It starts at the end, which is left to right or up and down, depends on the axis you're working with. Since this is a flex justified content, we are starting with the horizontal axis. Parts of this command that work great would be center command. Great for centering on the page. Space between is nice for formatting and keeping everything centered on the page and spaced out. Especially if you have a lot of items and a lot of space on your page, it works great. But sometimes you want it more borders. If you want more on your borders, you would change that instead of a space between to space around. Which gives you more of the side buffers. The other command that works on the cross axis is the line content. Flex start again starts at the end, which is the upper right hand side. You're not going to see much of an difference from that. If there were more rows to be worked with, it would change the rows, but since we were keeping it simple, we don't have enough boxes to actually show this as very well. Most of the commands I've dealt with so far have covered on the container itself. There's one command called flex that actually works on the individual objects, the box object here. And that's the flex command. The flex command has three aspects to it: flex grow, flex shrink, and flex spaces. If I were to implement this now, objects have grown to fit the page by a factor of 2. If I were to change, switch this around. I want to grow around and shrink them by a factor of 2. Everything changes quite a bit. Now, a word on compatibility. Most items will work for most browsers except for Safari. For Safari, you have to include the commands WebKit. So while I have display flex here, you actually have to include a second line just as for Safari to work. So all the commands you see that we demonstrated, you actually have to redo with this little code here in front of it just to make it work. I'm going to show you a second page here I've set up differently. This one actually has a little more code to it. I have actually had some divisions to it, some articles, and just a little more going on with it. In this demonstration, you can see I have my header, I use a nav article, I use the site, and use a footer. Now, as I try to resize it, watch what happens. It flexes until it reaches a certain size, which I tell it now to go to column mode. You see from the code here, when it says it's too small, change direction to column. Easy enough to do. Easy enough for your iPhones or phone projects to make it work. That doesn't compress too much more, but it will adjust to a certain size, and you can adjust what goes where by using the other commands such as row reverse or column reverse. Other than that, I have some other precautions to use. Sometimes the alignments of objects can be pushed beyond the borders of your container. And if they go off the screen, they are actually lost and you really can't scroll to them. Left, right, up, down doesn't matter. They actually are lost. And some properties for formatting text do not work on the Flex container. Column, clear, float, vertical line, they either have little effect or they have effect that you don't really want. So just a heads up, sometimes these things don't work. Keep in mind that when you're doing web pages and you want to compatible everybody, you will want to include flex the WebKit items just to make happy people with Safari, make them work. Thanks for listening.